review. Book one is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the CEO and founder of Chuck Chapman and men's psychology expert, no other than Mr. Charles Chapman.
Hey Daniel, how are you today?
I'm fabulous, fabulous like you, Mr. Chuck, and thank you so much and welcome
Yeah,
on Book One Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
yeah, sure, yeah. I'm for about the last 15 years, I've been working as a men's therapist and a men's coach. I'm a private practice, a therapeutic practice in Portland, Oregon, and I've been doing coaching with men for about the last 8 years. And coaching is a little bit different than therapy. Therapy is kind of like it's more of a medical model. It's like, okay, you've got a diagnosis, you've got anxiety, depression, something like that. Where coaching is, it's more about what's going on in your life and how do you have a better life. And how do you turn on my lights over here because I'm a little dark on this side? How do you have a better life? What are you doing in your life to that you can make some corrections? And I really enjoy working with men. Um, and let's see, yeah, I've written a couple of books. My latest book is called The Path 16 Virtues of Integrity. You can find that on Amazon. And also wrote there's a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. And I wrote a corresponding journal, 30-day recovery journal, that Robert endorses. And so, yeah, they've been working with a lot of guys who I would consider kind of the nice guys and nice guy syndrome. Are you familiar with the nice guy syndrome, Daniel?
No, sir. Can you please enlighten me?
Yeah, of course. So nice guy syndrome is men who are I would call fraudulently nice. In other words,
Okay.
they're nice to your face, you know, but they tell you what you want to hear, but then they go and they do the thing that they want to do. Everything they do is trying to get other people to like them. And so everything is about trying to get validation from other people. And as a result of that, they do things like make promises that they don't keep, or you know, something we call covert contracts, which is I'm going to make a deal with you, but I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm going to do this, and I expect you to do this in return. And when you don't do it, I get upset and angry. And I'm sure probably people out there listening probably have met somebody like that who, you know, seems like on the outside they're the nicest guy in the world, but they tell kind of half truths and cover up their mistakes and aren't really forthcoming. Um, and they lack a lot of courage, and they're also generally terrified of conflict, and so they avoid conflict. And so that book I was talking about, No More Mr. Nice Guy, it was a book I read about probably almost 20 years ago, and it really just changed my life. And I realized as I was reading the book, it was a description of me. It was like this guy was following me around. Um, and so then, I got a hold of the author, and we became kind of acquaintances and friends, and have been working with him for a lot, like I said, about the last 8 years, helping him in a couple of different ways. And in the meantime, kind of becoming an expert on the nice guy syndrome myself. Yeah, that's his book right there.
Mr.
Uh,
Chuck Chapman, thank you so much for empowering men all over the world. And what does the term nice guy really mean in psychological terms?
in psychological terms, it means two things: codependence and anxiety. Codependence meaning I need somebody else to validate me, and anxiety meaning I feel anxious if I'm not being validated.
Interesting indeed. Is being a nice guy truly a negative trait in relationships, or is it a problem something deeper?
Well, it's a it's a problem in that it can really hurt your relationship when you kind of um, for example, just it's the little small things, so nice guys tend to kind of hide things that they think other people might not like about them. Okay, so a really small one would be a guy that's married and he buys something for himself. Maybe it's a little bit more expensive than he wants his wife to know about it. And so instead of just saying, yeah, let's take a computer. Yeah, I bought a new computer. He might
Hmm.
say something like, yeah, I bought a new computer, but it was on sale and I got a really good deal. And, um, you know, and I really needed it, kind of trying to explain it away as opposed to just like, yeah, I needed a new computer. So what happens is after a while, she starts to distrust him. She starts to feel like, oh, I can't really trust this guy because he's not completely honest. And so it's a bad thing in regards of, the foundation of every relationship is based on trust. And as you start to erode the trust, then you start to erode the relationship. Now, being a nice guy, being a good man, or as I would call it, somebody who is truthful and honest and kind and giving and all of those qualities, those are great qualities. You don't want to lose that. But if you're doing something just to get something in return, I think that's when it becomes a problem.
Interesting. How does nice guy syndrome form, and what role does childhood conditioning play?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the way it forms is generally, when we're growing up, uh, we start to develop an idea of what the world is like, and the way we develop that idea is based on our experience as a child. So
Yes.
if I experience life as unsafe, or let's say um, the codependent part of it is that I become responsible for my mom's feelings, for example. Okay. So if mom's
Yes.
upset at me, it must be my fault and nothing to do with her because she's a grown woman. Therefore, I must make her unupset. And so as children, we start to develop this idea that when someone's upset with me, that causes a lot of anxiety in me. And so I have to soothe them in some way. And so
Okay.
nice guys tend to take that on then into their adult life, and they think, okay, so the way to deal with women or the feminine is I have to be responsible. So if she's upset, I've got to make her unupset. I've got to do something to make sure that she's not upset, because if she's upset, I'm afraid she'll leave me or she'll withdraw her love. And that can kind of happen again in childhood as we're growing up. If love is conditional from our parent, which is, as long as you perform, as long as you do everything right, I'm going to love you. But if you don't do everything right, then I'm going to be upset and I'm going to withdraw my love. And so nice guys generally unconsciously take this blueprint, this schema into their adult life. And they tend to see all relationships in this way of I'm responsible for the other person's feelings. And if they're upset, they're going to leave me. And that's where the anxiety comes in.
Very well said, Mr. Chuck. Beautifully articulated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Why why do so many self-identified nice guys feel unappreciated or resentful in marriage?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it kind of comes back to this idea of what we call the covert contract, where I'll just use an example here of, let's say a guy wants to have intimacy with his wife. So rather than just, trying to approach her, he says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to clean up the house. I'm going to make everything spotless. And that way, when she comes home, she's going to want to have sex with me. And so he does that. She comes home, and instead of being like, oh my gosh, thank you, let's go up to the bedroom, she's like, you missed a spot. you know,
Yes.
and then he gets upset, resentful, because he feels like he's doing all these things for her and she's not doing anything for him in uh in kind of like a payment for that. And so nice guys tend to kind of be less honest when it comes to just being direct with what it is that they want. And so rather in a relationship saying, "Hey, I would really like for us to spend some time together and be intimate," they'll do that covert contract kind of thing.
Indeed, Mr. Chuck. So let's talk about emotional dynamics in marriage. How can being overly accommodating create imbalance or resentment in a marriage?
Yeah. Yeah, resentment I think is huge. I mean, resentment, I would say resentment is the cancer of all relationships. And a resentment is basically when I have an expectation and that expectation isn't fulfilled, I get resentful. Okay? Now, a lot of times our expectations are unspoken. So I might get married thinking, oh, we're going to have sex every night of the week. But then, you know, life gets busy. She's a little bit disinterested. And rather than doing something about speaking my needs, I just get resentful. And every time you have a resentment, it's a uh, it's basically just a it's like a paper cut, you know. And one resentment isn't that big of a deal, but if you've got 1,000 that's developed over the course of many years in a relationship, then suddenly you've got this large wound, this a lot of resentment that you've been carrying around, and you're carrying around resentment, and she's carrying around resentment, and then one day you kind of look at each other and go, "Well, this isn't working," and and really the cure to that is to unearth all these little resentments, talk about them, and work on restoring the trust in the relationship. Because every time you have a resentment, it erodes the trust.
Definitely. Mr. Chuck, can you explain this profound quote in your website? Marriage is not a mystery, it's a mastery.
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's my take. All right, and it's this is that most guys. Are you married, Daniel?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Indeed.
All right. All right. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, my dad didn't teach me about how to be a husband. He didn't teach me
Yes.
about how to do conflict. He didn't teach me about like how do you keep the spark going. He didn't teach me about like, how do you show up in your relationship in a conscious way. And I think that that happens for most of us guys is we get married and all of a sudden we're this thing called husband, but we have no idea really what we're doing. We just kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'm just supposed to just, we're supposed to have sex and have fun together and, maybe talk once in a while, go on vacation, that kind of thing. But in terms of like actually being a husband, we have no clue. And the word husband actually comes from the word, it's a Nordic word, uh, house bond, meaning and bond meaning commitment. So house commitment, the man being the house committed to taking care of the house and all the people in it and all of that. So it's a commitment that a man makes to take care of the house and the people that live in the house. And as husbands, um, we as you know, like I said, weren't really taught how to do relationships. And so it becomes this mystery. It's like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. She's upset. I don't know why. Or, um, I get her, I get her what she wants, but it doesn't seem like that's what she really wanted after all. And it becomes this mystery, right? And
Yes.
I, what I discovered in working with men over the last 15 years and working in my own relationships is that being a husband is a skill set that you can learn. You can learn things like communication skills. You can learn things like emotional empathy. You can learn things like creating uh, a culture of gratitude and appreciation. You can learn how to lead in your relationship. And by leading, I don't mean dominating. I mean like showing up and having an idea of what it is that you want to do. Most men don't do that. They'll say to their wives, what do you want to do this weekend? She goes, I don't know. What do you want to do? And he goes, I don't know. What do you want to do? Right.
Yes.
Instead of coming in and saying, hey, you know what I was thinking about this weekend? Why don't we, it's a really nice day out. Why don't we go for a walk together? See, that's leadership. That's creating a vision. Let's go on a walk and then inviting her to come along. So, so I think you can get skill sets to become a really good husband. It's something you can learn just like anything else. But if you weren't taught it, then of course, how are you supposed to do it?
So, do you think being a husband is something to need to be master?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's mastered in the terms of mastery is being able to have a sense of confidence and knowing what I'm doing. So, for example, let's say, I don't know, do you know anything about how to work on cars?
No, actually,
Yeah,
sorry.
I don't either. All right. So if uh if I handed you a screwdriver and I say, Daniel, go over and fix that car, you're like, I don't know what to do, right? All right. But if you went to mechanic school and you worked as a mechanic and you solved a bunch of different problems and things like that, then you created a might become a master mechanic, right? You've mastered all of the skill sets. And now if I hand you a screwdriver, you're like, no problem. You go over and fix the car. And so I think marriage and being a husband is a similar thing in that you can learn how to be a really good husband and how to create a really amazing marriage. But it takes, just like becoming a mechanic, it takes education, it takes practice, and it takes a big commitment to learning the skill set. So that's what I mean by mastery.
Empowering answer, Mr. Touch. Very well said. I hope people out there, most especially men, learn from it. Let's talk about the identify and self worth of being a nice guy. How does a lack of self worth play into the nice guy persona?
Yeah, that's a great question. Underneath it all, the nice guy really kind of looks deep inside. One of the things he feels is unlovable and unacceptable by others. He feels like if people really knew who he was, they wouldn't like him. And so he becomes a chameleon. He decides, okay, I'm going to look around and see what other people do. And he tries to get reinforcement of love, not by based on who he is, but based on the persona that he puts out there. And so he's never really able to live authentically in his life. He's never able to feel a sense of confidence in who he is. And instead, that confidence is replaced with anxiety. And that anxiety is what sort of feeds that nice guy behavior. And part of the process of becoming whole and um, is becoming integrated. And integrated means learning to love yourself for who you are and allowing other people to love you for who you are. Not everybody's going to love you, you know, and that's okay. But there are going to be people who do love you, and those are the people you want to spend your time with. So the nice guy doesn't feel lovable and acceptable. And the way to turn that around is by starting to take care of yourself. A lot of nice guys, they do everything for everybody else, but they don't they do nice things for themselves. they're busy making sure everybody else is happy, and then they're not happy. So I guess I hope that answers your question there.
Indeed, Mr. Chuck. So, what will be your short term and long term goals as an author, as a founder and CEO of your company?
Yeah, my long term goals are I really want to help men, especially men who are married men, become husbands, become have the skill sets. It's one of the reasons why the program that I developed, it's called the Confident Husband Solution. That this program is about helping men do that. It's a year long program um, that has the education, it has a community, and it has coaching. So there's a 12 module program that teaches everything that I know that I've learned over the last several decades about being a husband. Um, there's a live coaching with me, and then there's a community where other men that are in the community that are in the program, can reach out to each other, talk, say, "Hey, I just got an argument with my wife. What do you guys think I should do? How should I handle this?" That kind of thing. And so, long term, I want to see every man who's married have the skills to be able to flourish in their relationship. Because one of the things I've seen happen over and over and over again is something called the walkaway wife syndrome. And that is men that, been married for maybe 10, 20 years. All of a sudden, one day, she wakes up and she says, "I want a divorce." And he didn't see it coming. He had no idea. And the reality is that she left years ago. The reality is that he failed to create the connection in his relationship all along. He thought everything was just going fine, that she wasn't complaining, so everything must be fine. But and it happened to me in my first marriage. I was married 20 years, and one evening she just said, "I'm done." I've seen it happen in multiple marriages of guys that I've worked with. Guys have been married, 15, 20 years, and one day the wife is just like, "I'm done," and he can't figure it out. And I want to help guys prevent that. I want to help guys not have to. I want to prevent a man having to go through the pain that I went through. And that's why I do this work.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Chuck, and thank you again for empowering men all over the world. What advice would you give to a nice guy who wants to stop finishing last without becoming someone they are not?
Well, there are many, many things he can do. In fact, in my No More Mr. Nice Guy, the 30-day recovery journal, I walk through 30 things that a guy can do to overcome his nice guy syndrome. And it starts with putting yourself first. It starts with making your needs a priority. It starts with being honest. It starts with not hiding. It starts with, um, being able to ask for help, reaching out, saying, "I don't," and it starts with not doing it alone. So many nice guys do life alone, which is another reason, for the work that I'm doing is there's so much power in community. There's so much power. And a lot of nice guys are, and maybe growing up where they're kind of afraid of men, in terms of like they've seen men as being dominant or, alpha male or, and so they've never really learned to be in community with other men. And there's just something powerful about being in community with other men that helps you show up with more masculine energy in your relationships. So I would say get yourself into a community of other men. Um, and that's part of what my program teaches.
Thank you for your advice, Mr. Chuck. And let's talk about the therapy and growth. How effective is therapy in helping a nice guys break unhealthy patterns?
Yeah. Well, I think therapy in and of itself is helpful for anybody in kind of any situation. The thing that therapy or coaching, I think, provides is um, insight to yourself, self awareness. And once you become self aware, then you can make choices to change. But if you're not aware, how do you make choices? So if you're not aware that you're a nice guy, you're not aware that you've been kind of walking in this pattern all of your life, you can't make any changes. But what therapy and coaching does is it creates an awareness around, okay, this is what I've been doing, and this is why I've been struggling in my life up to this point. And now that I'm aware of it, I can do something about it. And that's where coaching oftentimes comes in, is it helps you sort through and figure out what to do next. How do you actually, now that you're aware, how do you make those changes? Because change is hard. Change
Yes.
is difficult, but it's not impossible. It just requires work.
Hard work, I
Hard
think.
work. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
So, Mr. Jack, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because Abstract Essay now in its fifth season, Abstract Poetry in second season, and of course, my Book 101 review in its fifth season, Comedy 101 in second season, Food 101 in fifth season too, with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of five-star hotel in downtown Toronto, Geography 101 in its third season, as well as my love letters and my baby podcast. Mental Health 101, Movie 101 review, and Music 101 review in its fourth season, and my Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. So please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Charles or Mr. Chuck, what's the difference between being kind and being a people pleaser?
Mm. So being a people pleaser is you have an alternative motive. I'm going to give to get something in return. Where being kind is I'm just doing this because I'm a kind person. It's really just about the motivation. Am I doing this to manipulate, to get something? Or am I doing this just because I want to give you a gift?
Empowering answer. Mr. Chuck Chapman, thank you so much for empowering men all over the world. So,
Thank
can
you,
you
Daniel.
please invite our listeners to support your business and your books as well?
Yeah, so you can just go to chuckchapman.com and you can see my offerings there. You can follow me on Instagram. It's at chuckchapman.ma. I also have a YouTube channel, which is YouTube at Chuck Chapman. And you can find my books on Amazon. Uh, First one is The Path, 16 Virtues of Integrity. And the other one is No More Mr. Nice Guy, the 30-day recovery journal.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Chuck Chapman, because if you support him, more and more and more empowering coaching to come, more and more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Chuck, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure being here.
More to come, people. See you soon.